on December 15th, and that's where I want to begin tonight is the pressure. The pressure that's on the Broncos to get it done this weekend against Carson Wentz, no Travis Kelce, no Chris Jones. I mean, 1 to 10, what's the pressure on the Broncos to avoid this collapse that would bring back some ugly memories of 2008?
Well, I think given the fact that the Chiefs aren't playing their starters, I think they're going to go into it with quite a bit of pressure off of them. I think they're probably about a 5 when they walk into Empower Field on Sunday morning, right? It's there's the pressure of, hey, you win in the playoffs. If you lose, you potentially are out. If you lose, you blew a 94% chance of getting in. All those things are there, so that puts it at a 5. But if it was Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and everybody else playing over there, Chris Jones it'd be an 8 or a 9. Like it'd be through the roof. And if the first quarter doesn't go well, Will, it's going to be at an 8 or a 9.
Right.
Like because that building's going to get tense. Everybody in the stands is going to be tight. Like they're going to be at a fever pitch, ready to party, ready to celebrate the team getting back to the playoffs for the first time since Super Bowl 50. It'll be fun to get at the get-go. But let's say it's 10-0 after the first quarter. The tension will be palpable.
Very nervous energy in that building.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the stands, on the sideline. You're playing against a team that's playing with house money. Andy Reid is, always coming up with something creative to do. Now he can go for it on 4th downs. He can run fake punts. Like, what's he care, right? So it's dangerous, and I think it gets more and more dangerous if you don't come out and start well. If you come out and start well and you're up 10-0 after 1, the pressure's down to like a 3. I think they're on easy street at that point. So I think we'll know by 3:15 on Sunday afternoon how that thing's going to go.
Yeah, but here's where I'll give you pushback, James. You say the pressure is lower because they're playing the backups. I think that makes the pressure higher, that choking away the playoffs from 9-5 to 9-8 would be even more inexcusable because it happened against Carson Wentz and not Patrick Mahomes.
I see what you're saying. I mean, it'd be more inexcusable.
Which in turn increases the pressure on the Broncos that you have to win a game that Vegas has made you a double-digit favorite in.
Maybe. I guess I would look at it if I'm them. I'm going in a heck of a lot more confident. And the more confident I am, the pressure goes down. But if you're thinking too far ahead, or if you're thinking negatively, if you're thinking, oh my God, we can't blow it to this group, then yeah, that could ratchet up the pressure. I see your point, but again, I just think confidence brings down the level of the pressure. But I think what you're talking about is exactly why I say if they're down after a quarter, then all of a sudden that meter, that thing is just pegged, right? Because it's, oh my God, we're going to blow this. Oh my God, we're losing to Carson Wentz and the backups. We're going to be the laughingstock of the NFL, right? Then those things start getting into your head. Hopefully with this team, those aren't in their head during warm-ups and at kickoff and, during the first couple of series, because otherwise they may be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, the thing that bothered me, though, and it didn't bother me that he did it, but it just sort of bothered me as a fan of, these guys may be cracking, was there was reports from multiple people in the locker room after the Cincinnati game that Courtland Sutton just sat there and stared into space kind of stunned. That usually happens when your season ends, James, not when you've blown your second of 3 chances. I do worry with guys like Sutton, guys like Bowles, who have been here forever, never been to the playoffs, to get reports of Courtland Sutton just sort of staring into thin air, flabbergasted that they didn't beat the Bengals. That, again, seems like a little bit of cracks to me. You don't see those scenes painted until a team's season ends, usually.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a defeatist type of attitude, right? It's maybe a little fatalistic, which I get why Courtland Sutton and Garrett Bowles and some of those guys would be fatalistic. It'd be hard not to, if you're a player and you're sitting in that position, to not think, here we go again. We're all saying it, right? We're all thinking it. You sit on your couch on Sunday as a fan, and you've been a fan of this team, your entire life, and you're watching it going, I can't believe this is happening again. I can't believe they're going to somehow squander this and miss the playoffs and all the rest of it. So I think that there's a understandability to it if he was a little bit shell-shocked. It also could just be, man, that was a bummer of a game, right? Like that was an emotional roller coaster where you get the quasi Hail Mary to tie the game that could have been the game winner. Like that is the celebration after that is through the roof, and then you manage to squander it in overtime. Even though the Bengals hit the upright on a game-winning field goal, you still can't do anything. All you had to do was to get in was tie, and you couldn't pull that off. Like, I just think there's plenty of reasons why you would sit there and just be ticked and kind of stare into space. I'm not going to – one, I didn't witness it. But two, I don't know that it's fair to read into what somebody's reaction is right after a game. I think that's when emotions run high.
Yeah, no, I get it. And it was a really frustrating loss, and I filled in on the morning show on Tuesday. It was John Davis and I in for Stoke and Mike and Mark, and we had Mike Kliss on at 6:45, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, James, because Mike told John and I that he has a source, and we obviously trust Mike, just like we trust Mace, two best Broncos reporters out there, that he has a source that said Sean Payton held up two fingers after the Mims touchdown. Now, the TV cameras definitely caught Bo Nix doing it, and we've seen that highlight 100 times. But what do you make of Mike saying that he's been told on good authority that Sean also held up two and then changed his mind in the 90 seconds to 2 minutes it took him to review the Marvin Mims touchdown? That could explain Courtland Sutton's look of dejection as well, that the head coach initially wanted to do it and then decided he didn't trust his offense enough to go for two.
I think that's totally plausible. I think the chances that Bo Nix was holding up two fingers saying he wanted to go for two and his head coach hadn't done it before him, I think is virtually zero. The quarterback is looking over at the head coach, getting the call, and then he's putting up however many fingers and letting everybody on the field know, hey, we're going for two. He ain't doing that on his own.
No.
He's not making that call. He's mirroring what the head coach was doing. So initially, Sean Payton was, let's go for it. Let's go for the win, which was the right call. His gut reaction was the right call. If it hadn't have been reviewed, if there hadn't have been the bobble, if it hadn't have been that close to the sideline, they would have gone for two. The biggest issue I have with it is that's a decision you make, Will, when you get the kickoff.
Right.
You got to know, if we go down and score, what are we doing? Are we going for the win or are we going for the tie? Especially as the clock starts to tick down, right? Like if you'd scored on the first play of the drive, maybe that changes it, maybe, but it still shouldn't. You should still try and take a lead. But if you score in that way and you know you're scoring in the last few seconds, you got to know you're going for two. You got to have thought this through. You got to have thought about the fact that, hey, we haven't forced the Bengals to punt all night long, not one time, and we're gonna have it come down to a coin flip. Like, yeah. It was a terrible decision. The fact that he changed his mind just makes it worse.
Yeah, pretty interesting report. Pretty interesting report from Kliss, right? That was the first time I had heard that, and he told John and I here live on the Fan.
But I would be shocked if that's not true. Because again,
I trust that Mike wouldn't have said that on the radio unless he had a good source that said it was true. Yeah,
Bo Nix ain't holding up two fingers on his own. He ain't. He's not doing that. So he was mirroring what his coach did. They changed their mind during the review, which was a bad decision. I get it though. You start second guessing yourself. You start, somebody gets in your ear and you got an analytics guy and he's saying, hey, just as a reminder, coach, if we tie, we're in the playoffs, and you overthink it. It's a classic case of overthinking it. And it's a classic case of too many people being involved with the decision. And you do have to have your version of Ernie Adams, who's basically the game time or game day decision guy that was in Bill Belichick's ear for decades, helping him with those kind of things. You got to have somebody you trust, but you should have already had that conversation. That's the part of it that makes me angry is when the Bengals were driving to go up 7, you should have been thinking, what are we doing when we get the ball back? You're the play caller.
Yeah.
Not only are you making that decision, you're the play caller. You should know that. You should know if you have a 2-point play that you absolutely love, and you're gonna go with it and go for the win. Yeah, it was a terrible decision, and it makes it even more of a gut punch for the players, and all the more reason you just be sitting there dejected. Like you went from this huge high of like we're gonna steal one here to we got conservative, we got soft. We blinked, and we ended up losing in overtime. And that's a tough pill to swallow.
I mean this with all due respect, so I'm about to insult someone. But why are you letting some analytics nerd determine if you're going to the playoffs for the first time since 2015? Like, show some stones, right? Go for two. Sean holds up two. Bo holds up two. And then here comes, I don't know, Ernie on line 1. Well, actually, Sean, we should kick the extra point because the computer model says 52%. And I wrote about this the night it happened. I wrote about this on Saturday night. Sean went to a hot microphone and said the tie element factored into the decision.
Yeah, which is terrible. It's just terrible. Playing for the tie is a terrible idea. And I don't disagree with you necessarily, but my biggest issue, and you and I used to go round and round on this with John Fox, right? Like, part of my issue with John Fox was he couldn't figure out what he was. Sometimes he was Riverboat John, and sometimes he was, Mr. Conservative. It's like, just pick a lane. So if you go back to the last two games, it was the Chargers game, right, where they had the 4th and 6 basically at midfield. They punted,
and then Herbert took the ball 90 yards.
Right, down 2 or whatever, and then it turned into a 2-score game, and it was over. Right, the analytics there, and they said it during the broadcast. The analytics there is to go for it.
Right,
it's like 52% chance to win if you go for it and get it or whatever it was. The math said go for it. If you're gonna be listen to Ernie the Nerd, then listen to Ernie the Nerd guy all the time.
Right.
Don't not do it against the Chargers and then do it against the Bengals. Like, pick a lane and be consistent. You may not like how Dan Campbell calls a game and how he gambles and rolls the dice all the time, but he does it all the time. He doesn't care if it's a preseason game or the NFC title game in San Francisco. And you know what? You don't second guess yourself and kick yourself if you stick true to who you are. It's like, that's what we do. That's what we do. And if you break from what you normally do and it backfires, man, you're kicking yourself. If you stick with what you normally do and it doesn't work out, it stinks, but at least you're not kicking yourself afterward. That's the worst kind of regret. So, yeah, are you analytics team or not analytics team? Like pick a lane, Sean. Pick a lane.
Yeah, and it's the old when you're taking the SAT, James, and you've got 4 answers, and you read the 4, and you're like, I'm pretty sure it's C. Just bubble in C, dude. Because Correct. If you switch to A, it's going to be wrong. The correct answer was C.
Well, and how many times have you done that where you go out to the tavern and you're playing trivia, right?
And go with your gut.
The question comes up, and the first answer is, it's Ireland. And then you start talking as a group, and it's a longer song than normal, and somebody talks in, it's Scotland. And then you turn it in, and the guy reads Ireland, and then you're really ticked because you had it. You had it if you'd have just turned it in. So to me, that's what they did. They overthought it, got too many cooks in the kitchen, and it backfired. I really, if they'd have lost going for 2, it would have been a bummer. But as a fan, I got to live with that a lot better than you go conservative. You kick the extra point. You say you're playing for the tie to some extent, and then you lose in overtime. Not only that, but if you're playing for the tie, then manage the clock properly in overtime.
Right?
Like, you can't burn 16 seconds or whatever it was on the last drive and punt it back to the Bengals with a ton of time left. Like, if you manage the clock better there, even if you do have to punt it to them, the Bengals likely aren't going all the way down and going to be able to get a touchdown. And then you got a guy who just doinked a 33-yarder coming out trying to win it. I like those chances a heck of a lot better than what they did. So, again, inconsistent. You say the tie came into play, but then you didn't call the overtime plays and clock management like the tie was in play. It's all over the board. So there's some breakdown in communication, some breakdown in decision making, some breakdown in what's this team's MO, what's their personality, and that's problematic.
Yeah, no, it's frustrating. It's frustrating all around. I mean, James, it's now Thursday night, and we're still upset at what happened on Saturday, right? It was one of the more frustrating regular season losses in a season where we've now had 2 of them, absolute gut punches, the loss in Arrowhead and then the loss in Cincinnati. And not that the loss in Los Angeles wasn't a gut punch, but Cincinnati and Kansas City take the cake for me. All right, we started this conversation discussing pressure on the Broncos. And Bo Nix yesterday was asked at the podium about the pressure, and I thought he gave an excellent answer. Let me play it for you.
Well, I mean, our goal the past couple of weeks is to get to 10. I mean, we have another opportunity to do that. I think this lifestyle, this situation, us in quarterbacks, we just kind of live with pressure, and that's just kind of second nature at this point. So I believe pressure is a privilege, and I was taught that a long time ago. So there's no pressure without opportunity. So right now that means we got great opportunity to go do something special.
I mean, there's no pressure without opportunity, and pressure is a privilege. I get it's a soundbite. You can't win and lose games based on sound bites, but that actually did make me feel better. That's a rookie talking like a 10-year vet, and I actually really enjoyed that answer from Bo.
Yeah, and that's a quarterback where I do think the 2 programs he played in college and the number of starts he had in college does help with this. He's been in a lot of big situations, right? Like playing at Auburn, playing in the SEC, you've gone into some hostile environments. Like there's a lot of pressure in those games. When he's at Oregon, they played a lot of big games. So he's certainly faced things where maybe it's not what you'll get in the playoffs. Maybe it's not what you get, obviously, in a Super Bowl. But in a 2:30 Sunday afternoon game against the Chiefs backups, like, okay, I think he's seen that kind of pressure before. So it's a perfect soundbite. He says all the right things. He's 100% right. Like, pressure is a privilege. So, you should consider yourself lucky that you're in a spot where there is pressure. And it sounds like a guy who isn't going to be overwhelmed by the moment, which, while I wasn't ready to anoint him as the savior after a loss at Kansas City, we did talk about it after that game of, hey, he did show that the moment wasn't too big for him, right? He wasn't intimidated by down 2 at Arrowhead Stadium in the final 2 minutes. That was a positive to take out of a loss. It's not a moral victory, but you can still take some positives. I don't think the moment's going to be too big for him on Sunday either.
No, I don't either. And you're right. He has lived up to those moments. I mean, that second half, and I just went round and round with Zach Bia at the end of the drive, that second half in Cincinnati, there was a lot to walk away impressed by. I mean, 3 touchdown passes, all 3 that could make highlight reels. The pass to Sutton in the corner, I thought was pretty. The ball to Marvin Mims on the deep one that traveled like 62 yards in the air was just ridiculously good. And then, yeah, I understand there's a little element of luck on the 3rd touchdown, but to even create that play on 4th and 1 from Bo Nix to get a chance to get the ball in Mims' hands and ultimately tie the game, I thought he looked really bad in the first half, I'll be honest, and I thought he looked pretty darn good in the second half.
I would agree with that assessment. And I think yes, there was luck involved in the final touchdown, without a doubt. But how many quarterbacks do we see in this league who get flushed out of the pocket like that and can't get the throw anywhere near a receiver? Right?
A lot.
To even get it to where your guy had a shot at it was an impressive athletic feat. It really was. So yeah, it was encouraging in the second half. I do think, though, it does show when they can run the football, it sets him up in so much of a better position. Like, the Marvin Mims touchdown, it was a great throw. Ball traveled, 67 yards in the air?
Yeah, just absurd.
It's a tough angle from the right hash to a receiver that's kind of running away from you. That's not an easy throw by any means. That's not a throw that every quarterback in the league can make, which is kind of what I've been looking for from him. But it's also set up by the fact that they're just gashing the Bengals with the run, and it sets it up to where he doesn't have quite as much pressure. He didn't have anybody in his face on that play. They're not just bringing the house. They're bringing safeties up into the box to try and stop the run, so the coverage is easier to read. Like, it did set up better for him. To me, though, I was really disappointed by you get the fumble. T. Higgins fumbles. You get the ball there. It's 3rd and 15. You get a first down. You're knocking on the door for field goal range, and you're certainly not going to, you're going to be able to potentially run the clock out in the process. And he throws the pick. It was like he didn't have a shot at it. It's like you got to be able to make that play. That's a Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, the elite quarterbacks move the chains on 3rd and 15 because it wasn't in their favor. It wasn't a good down and distance. There was no threat of a run, and he couldn't make a play. And then the 2 drives in overtime were extremely concerning. The miss on Troy Franklin, and the cameras caught him on the sideline saying, "I missed him." He did. Like, that's a big play. Might be a score if he hits him. You have to make that throw. That is an easy NFL throw, and he airmailed it by 5 yards.
Yeah, but how many times this season have we seen Troy Franklin on the ground without the football in his hand? I'm more disappointed that this is in September. This is late December. This is the playoffs on the line for the first time in a decade. This is a big freaking deal. And the play calls to Troy Franklin, who's on the ground. I mean, those two looked like they've never met or spoken to each other. Not that they've connected for over 2,000 yards and 23 touchdowns the last 2 seasons in Eugene. I've got a bigger problem there with Troy Franklin being the target more than anything else.
Yeah, their lack of chemistry is kind of hard to figure out.
It's mind-boggling.
It really is, but you're right. Like, would you have felt better if they were taking a shot at Cortland there?
Yes.
Or at
Mims,
Marvin Mims.
or Devon Vele, who Devon Vele is clearly the second best receiver on this team, and I feel like we see him like once a game. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and not to cry about spilt milk here, but I also watch the Lions and see Tim Patrick making plays and thinking, boy, that'd be the kind of guy you really could use instead of a rookie during an overtime game trying to get into the playoffs.
Well, I'm glad you're crying about it because I cry about it on Twitter all the time and people are mad at me. And I'm like, I'm going to keep hammering this. Horrible decision by George Paton. Horrible decision to cut Tim Patrick.
Well, and I get it because I was doing an episode of Coffee Break the day Baron Browning was traded, and I get it that they've got other good pass rushers, but the 6th round pick, I think it was the 6th round pick they got for him, maybe even the 7th. That ain't doing you any good as you're trying to make a push for the playoffs here.
No.
And an extra pass rusher would help. It certainly would. You can never have enough pass rushers, especially, knock on wood, if somebody gets dinged up. And that was a big gamble. To get a late round pick next year, like a guy that for the most part is probably going to be a camp body, might make the roster for a year or two, might be a practice squad guy for a year or two. They just make decisions that seem strange to me if you really were trying to get into the postseason this year and really did think you had a chance to compete. All they needed was Baron Browning to make one play against the Bengals if he'd have been in the rotation. That's all they would have needed, and we'd be talking about, hey, what's their seed going to be, instead of, hey, can they avoid a collapse after being 9-5 with a 94% chance of getting in the playoffs?
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I wrote at denversports.com this week that perspective can wait, James. The Broncos missing the playoffs would be crushing. And all of these geniuses on social media tell me, you're moving the goalposts, you're moving the goalposts. Well, guess what? They were 9-5 on December 15th. I'm allowed to move the goalposts. I'll have perspective in March. I'll have perspective in April that, yeah, they got a winning season in Bo Nix's rookie year when he was a 6 QB off the board. But don't tell me right now I need to have perspective. It's sports. Sports are supposed to be emotional, and missing the playoffs would be devastating, heartbreaking, crushing. Throw whatever word in there you want to use. I am sick of these people that go, if they miss the playoffs, whatever, it was still a great year. No, you got to finish the job.
I totally agree with you, and here's some perspective for you. If they lose and finish 9-8 and miss the playoffs, if they finish 9-8 and weird things happen and they back in, this may not be the case. But if you're 9-8 and miss the playoffs, I think you can make the argument that this year was worse than last year. Last year they were 8-9. They played a game on Christmas Eve with the playoffs on the line. They won at Buffalo. They beat the Chiefs. This year will be 9 wins against a bunch of bad football teams. It will be losing to the Chiefs' backups with the playoffs on the line. It'll be blowing a 3-game chance to get into the playoffs by losing your last 3. And you'll have improved by 1 game facing a much easier schedule. Last year, 8-9 with 2 signature wins is better than 9-8 with no signature wins in my mind.
Okay, but at least you go into year 2 of Bo Nix feeling like we finally jumped off the QB carousel. Like, at least...
Why? He didn't beat anybody.
Oh, James,
why would you feel that way? Why would you feel that way?
I am so excited that for the first time in a decade, we don't have to talk about quarterback in January, February, and March leading up to free agency in the draft. I'm just so excited.
All right, well, I will be going into the offseason 100% not sure that they have the right head coach if they blow this. That will be – because he's made a bad decision in more games than he's gone without making a bad decision. And it just gets overlooked. I don't know why. I guess because he won a Super Bowl nearly 2 decades ago.
But he's also he's also not getting fired. So, like, I can just stop you right there.
Why? If Kyle Shanahan gets fired, you don't think Greg Penner should look at it and say, when's this guy going to be on the market again? Time to eat the 3 years of Sean's deal and go get Kyle Shanahan.
James, I will take you to Elway's, Shanahan's, get you the seafood tower, whatever your heart desires if Sean Payton gets fired. It just ain't happening.
He'll be 17-17.
Vance Joseph?
Whoop-de-doo.
Vance Joseph? I wouldn't rule that out, and I know people are going to think I'm crazy. I would not rule that out. George Payton?
Oh, no, he'll scapegoat somebody.
George Payton?
He scapegoated Russ last year.
Exactly. So, but again, I'm not even betting you. I'm just offering this to you. So I assume you graciously accept. I will take you to a nice steakhouse, and you can get whatever you want if Sean Payton gets fired.
Okay. You don't think, though, if they lose on Sunday to the Chiefs' backups and lose their last 3 games, and let's say he makes another horrible decision. He made multiple ones in the Chargers game. He made a bad one against the Bengals. He makes another bad decision that costs him a game. You don't think at 17-17 with no playoff appearances and a total collapse, that conversation should be on the table?
No, because it's just unfair to Bo. You can't change courses with Bo when you're developing. It's like when Harry.
You got a guy that makes a bad decision every single week.
James, it's like when it's when Harry Potter had a new defense against the dark arts teacher every single year. It just wasn't fair to Harry. This would not be fair to Bo to change head coaches on him after 1 year.
You don't think upgrading to Kyle Shanahan would be fair to Bo? Now, look, if you're going to go out there and you're going to be interviewing, Ben Johnson, who I think is going to be a really good head coach, he would be the guy I would go get if I was hiring a head coach. Not in this situation, but if I was the Bears, that'd be who I'd be going after. I don't think you make that move for that. I think if there's something crazy that happens and Kyle Shanahan or someone like that is on the open market, I think you'd be foolish to sit on your hands and say, well, we got Sean Payton. He can mess something up every single game and cost us football games. He won a Super Bowl back in 2007. Kick that onside kick. Like, come on, that'd be foolish.
All right, well, we got to go, but there is a lot of news coming out of Broncos Park powered by Common Spirit today. Don't forget, Denver Sports is on YouTube. Check us out there. Please subscribe. We'll fill you in on all the morning's news next.